I don't think there's any issue with the ability to catch humans in Pal World and put them to work. So would I feel the same way if real-life racism or real-life slavery or real-life violence toward LGBTQIA people were portrayed in video games or media? Or is there just a line between what is tasteful and is not? I actually think that's part of the problem. People think about there being a line between distasteful and tasteful, and the discussion is more nuanced than that. Like, look at Lovecraft Country. Lovecraft Country was an amazing show and an amazing book. It could only exist because it told a very true-to-life story of what racism was like experienced by black people in the South, combined with Lovecraftian overtones. I would say that is a very amazing piece of media, even though it portrays racism toward black people. The racism was important to explore. But, like, there are board games that very casually portray slavery, like Puerto Rico. And in general, people feel like that is in poor taste because it's not exploring that. It's just using it as a game mechanic. And that feels exploitative. But then there are RTS games that show, like, lower-born people being used as workers while higher-born people are used as, like, warriors and knights. And that is, again, not as distasteful because it's not directly reflecting a real-life event. Like, whenever you're portraying something like this, you have to ask, A, how closely is it portraying something that actually happened in real-life history? B, if it is closely representing something that happened in real-life history, is it doing it respectfully? And C, is it necessary to the story or themes that it is exploring? Lovecraft Country showed real violent racism toward black people and needed to tell its story, so people found that in good taste. Meanwhile, Pal World lets you catch people with a nameless ball and make them do repetitive tasks in your base, and that is nowhere near a realistic portrayal of what slavery is actually like, so it's pretty detached. But in a game like Puerto Rico, you are literally playing a colonizer who's using native people to work on your plantations. And that is largely seen in poor taste. Even though in the game it's abstracted that you're just moving little brown circles around, but, like, it's still pretty much in poor taste. Similarly, like, we're pretty much okay with killing in video games. We know that killing in video games doesn't promote violence. If a mission in a video game had you going around committing hate crimes and saying you're an awesome person for doing so, like, that would be in poor taste, right? But then again, we have, like, Baldur's Gate 3, where you could go around and just slaughter a bunch of goblins, and that's kind of a fantasy hate crime, and we don't look at that in poor taste. So yeah, there's multiple dimensions here. Things aren't gonna be 100% permissible or 100% distasteful. Like, the world does not exist in black and white. You're always going to have to ask these questions about any portrayal of racial violence or violence against a minority or an oppressed people. And I would say catching a random bandit in a Pal Ball doesn't really count as violence against an oppressed people. Like, that's why it's more or less kind of just a weird but otherwise permissible thing. It's always going to be on a case-by-case basis. I mean, look, there are, like, dictator simulators like Tropico, but they are made in such a way that they're not really glorifying what it means when you oppress people, even though part of that game is, like, actual oppression. So there's a lot that you can do to portray this stuff tastefully. It's just going to be different on a case-by-case basis. There's no one line that suddenly you cross and you're in the bad territory. There's a great piece of advice when it comes to creating media. Ideas aren't bad, execution is bad. Again, if you told me the idea, I'm going to make a Lovecraftian piece of media that shows real brutal examples of real-life racism experienced by blacks in sundown towns in the South, I would say that's probably a bad idea. The way Lovecraft Country executed it was brilliant, so it's not the idea, it's the execution.